Hello and welcome to Web of Light. I'm Dr. Kevin.
And I'm Lori Powers Otto.
And we are here to be your host today. As those of you who just finished watching our first show, if you stuck around for our second show, then you know that this is our first day of live streaming. Here on the Web of Light, we are into our fourth season, we decided. This is the first time we've tried live streaming. We tape 4 shows all on the same day once a month that get released weekly in public access channels throughout the country. If you have recently joined us on one of your public access channels and you've discovered us and didn't know if we've been there all along or are just a new addition, please send us an email to right there, drkevin@weboflight.com. And let us know you've joined the Web of Light family. We are a spiritually based, informational, inspirational talk show where we bring on people that are weaving a web of light in the world. We would love to hear from you. If you go to facebook.com/mydrkevin, MYDRKEVIN, you can see this show. You can be watching it as it's live. I'm going to be monitoring my phone. If you have questions to ask or comments, you can put them there, and we will try to get them shared on air. So there's all the information that you needed to know and some that maybe you didn't. So how are you today, Lori?
I am wonderful. How are you, Dr. Kevin?
Good. Are you enjoying our live streaming opportunities here?
I really am. I'm super excited about this. I mean, I hope people will write in questions, comments, let us know how we're doing because this is a whole new chapter. It's very exciting.
Yes, it is very exciting. And we like the idea of being able to be interactive with you. So for those of you that are joining us for the first time, Lori and I always have a little bit of a conversation. We share an inspirational story, and then we bring on today's guest. So I have a little something that I wanted to bring to the table before we get to today's story and today's guest, which is the concept of professionality. What do you think about the concept of professionality, Lori?
I think it's misconstrued by too many people. I know too many people that think if you're being professional, that somehow you need to be cold and distant, and I don't agree with that. I think you can be professional and still be engaging and fun and lively. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, professional to me, when somebody is a professional, first of all, it's somebody that is either making a living, getting, compensated in some way, shape, or form for what they're doing, that it is something that they have an expertise in, and that whatever service they're offering, because usually professional, you think of service.
Right.
That whatever service they're offering, that they deliver the service. They deliver what they promise. In fact, I'm a big believer, and back when I used to be a sales training manager for American Express, I would be, you want to under-promise and over-deliver.
Yes.
You will never have an unhappy client. You might have a client that has a blip, but you're never going to have a truly unhappy client if you under-promise and over-deliver.
Yes.
What unfortunately has become professional defined is often, do you look the way that society has decided you should look for the profession you're in?
Right.
And if you're not looking that way, no matter how good quality of a service you're delivering, that somehow people think that they get away with calling you unprofessional.
Right. And that can be just from the clothes you wear, your hairstyle, or, tattoos, any of that. Yep. I knew a young woman who was denied a teaching job based solely on her tattoos. She had all the qualifications and she was wonderful with kids. She did eventually get a job, but it took a long time because they said your tattoos are unprofessional.
Well,
ridiculous.
And I think that we have to look at the fact that that school was reinforcing to the kids that it was more important about you being some obscure idea of what professional is than being good at your job.
Exactly. Exactly.
We don't know that they gave a less qualified person that job, but they may have given that person a less qualified person that
Because they
job
looked the part,
because they looked the part.
which is ridiculous.
Yes. I was recently, somebody told me I was unprofessional. And, you know, it's very interesting because they told me, and these comments have happened, especially with me being on media, and sometimes it's because I do this show and I have bare feet. Oh, don't show those bare feet. Don't you know feet are ugly? They were God's biggest mistake to ever put feet on those ankles.
No, shoes are ugly, and those are a big mistake, but whatever.
Yeah. I wear shorts. Yes, I sit cross-legged, I slouch. But do we bring you good guests?
Right.
Do we ask good questions? Do we hopefully inspire and motivate you? I know how to do professional. I did professional in the corporate world for years. I have a ton of suits.
Me too.
I have matching socks and pocket scarves and ties. I can do professional with the best of them, you know? But I know a lot of people that have $1,000 suits and have nickel integrity.
Right.
And a dime worth of talent.
Exactly, and but that goes to you're not dressing somebody's idea. Well, you know what? I love the way you dressed. You're very approachable, you're very knowledgeable, you're very kind, you're very open. That's what I would want from a talk show host, a radio show host, a teacher,
Yep.
a mentor, all the things you are. I actually just got rid of all my suits because they don't represent me. And I had some really nice suits, so
There you go.
women are welcome. But if that means something to you, wear them. But they don't mean anything to me. And I actually worked with somebody who said I couldn't wear jeans when I was seeing clients or teaching or whatever because it's unprofessional. And I told them they were uptight and needed to get a life. Because just because you put on a fancy suit doesn't mean you're qualified, doesn't mean you know what you're talking about or that you have any personality.
Absolutely. So I do want to share today's story, and then I'm going to introduce today's guest. And you know, one of the things that we do talk about here, and I associate this somewhat with my Unitarian Universalism principles, that we find the inherent worth in all people. And that when anything happens to anybody that's part of the human race, the only race that there really is, all the rest of it is just faces and aspects, that it hurts all of us. And when something good happens, it celebrates all of us.
Yes.
So I wanted to share this story. In the string of latest progressive rulings, the Supreme Court of India, yes, we're talking about India, has just struck down a colonial-era law that made adultery punishable for up to 5 years in prison. And the 158-year-old piece of legislation stated that a man had legal grounds to sue his wife's lover without her consent. However, men were free to sleep with a married woman so as long as they had her husband's consent. No double standards there.
Oh, no.
In contrast, if a woman's husband was unfaithful, she would not have been granted the same legal right. Violations were punishable by up to 5 years in prison, a fine, or both.
For the woman.
For the woman.
Ridiculous.
And so they overthrew this. It was based unconstitutional, gender bias, saying that a husband is not the master of a woman.
Right.
So we want to celebrate
Yes.
that we are seeing more light in the world. We're seeing some countries that have been historically very double standard, remembering that it has as many goddesses in its deity line as gods. And every time you made a woman a second-class citizen, you really ticked off one of your goddesses, just so you know. Okay. This ruling comes just weeks after the court overturned a Victorian-era law that made homosexuality punishable by a life in prison.
But I'm grateful that they overturned those ridiculous laws.
Yes.
They were just issued out of fear.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So what I want to do now is I'm going to introduce today's guest. And I, for some reason, just lost everything that I had up about her. There we go. Kim Fernald Ramsey-Winkler. Yes, I'm cheating because I wanted to make sure I got the names all in the right order. after how many months of saying Lori Auto Powers versus Lori Powers Auto, I thought, we're just not going to do this.
Get it right.
I am a mom, a wife, an author, a healer, a mentor, non-traditional, a bit weird, and proud of it. So she
Yes.
fits right in here
Love
with
it.
us at Web of Light.
Love it.
And the reason that I wanted to have Kim on today, I mean, there are many reasons. I've actually known Kim, I think I met Kim 3 years ago, I think it is now, 3 or 4 years ago. She actually, a place that I was doing, bringing psychic readers into, she came in and did a reading for me, and then came and did some stuff at the store for a while. It wasn't my store, but it was a store. And I saw when she wrote this on Facebook, and I thought this was a very timely thing. And I do see that we had a comment or a question come in, and I'll look at it in a minute, but I want to read this first. And she hashtagged it, "Why I Didn't Report." When I was 4, I did report, sort of. I told my parents. But the boys involved were children too, a few years older than me. And my mother said it was my fault for going outside to play with them in the first place. She told me to go. So I learned to keep my mouth shut. When I was 8, I didn't report because he was someone my parents liked. And again, I was afraid I would be blamed again. When I was 11, it was just sexual harassment by a group of teenage boys. I told my parents. They told the boys' parents. 5 years later, I was still being harassed and threatened for speaking up. Because of the consequences the boys faced, I reported that time, but I wished I hadn't. When I was 16, I didn't report because he was also 16, and I didn't think the police would do anything, and I was afraid of him. When I was 17, I didn't report because I've been too frightened and frozen to say no, so I believed it wasn't assault until months later, and then I figured it was too late to say anything. When I was 25, I didn't report, and I can't say why, because there's no way to explain it without saying something that would identify him, and identifying him would cause too much harm to people who had nothing to do with it. So I'm still not reporting. When I was 37, I didn't report because I was alone in a hotel room with him. So even though I said no repeatedly, I figured I had to accept it because I'd been stupid enough to be alone with him in the first place. The times I didn't report, it was because I was afraid, and I believed I had asked for it, I deserved it. The times I did report, I was blamed, harassed, and threatened, and those reports weren't even to authorities, just to my parents. People hold on to stories like this for years, decades, not because it didn't happen, but because it did. And we're certain we won't be believed, or we'll be blamed, or the authorities won't do anything anyway. Not reporting doesn't mean it's a lie when someone finally does report. It means they're courageous as hell and are finally speaking out, even though they know what the consequences might be to them.
Takes a lot of guts.
Kim, thank you for your courage. Thank you for your courage for posting this on Facebook. Thank you for your courage to be here today and to share some of these stories. I'm not going to assume anything. Why now?
Honestly, I have to admit it was kind of bandwagon jumping. So many people now with the Christine Blasey Ford thing are coming out and saying, she's not the only one who waited for a long time to report something. A lot of us waited. A lot of us are still waiting. And I saw friends having the courage to post their stories on Facebook and Twitter. And knowing that I wasn't alone helped me. And so I hoped that by posting my stories, I would show others, it's okay that you haven't reported. It's okay that you're holding this in, but you don't have to. Even if you're not going to report it, you can still tell friends, you can tell family, you can tell a professional and get help to deal with it. but it's time for all of us. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here.
That's okay.
It's
I-
okay.
It's an emotional
It's time
subject.
for all of us to recognize that this stuff happens way too often. And way too often, the person that it happens to doesn't dare to say a word. And it's time for us to accept that people are going to hold things in out of fear, out of desperation, out of belief that it was their fault. And by saying, when somebody does finally come forward, by saying, oh, well, she's just lying, she's just trying to start trouble, you're perpetuating it.
Right.
You're continuing the culture in which people hold these things in from childhood. And that's not okay. It's just not okay anymore.
It's funny because I know a man who was horribly sexually abused. And the first thing he said is, they're just making it up for attention. Why wouldn't they have reported it when they were a child or when it happened? And I said, well, why didn't you? Well, I was just a kid. Okay, why didn't you report it in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s? Your 70s is when you first made mention of it. You can wait all those years, but a woman can't? I mean, how is that double standard even an option in someone's mind?
Exactly, and that's another thing I've been seeing a lot of. A man comes forward and says, now, first of all, I want to make it clear, it takes a lot of guts for a man to come forward and admit having been sexually assaulted.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes it takes more courage than it does for a woman, because with a man, you've got the added layer of, well, you could have fought back. What are you, weak? What are you, I can't use the words.
Well,
'cause
if they're
we're
a
on-
man when it happens, if they're a child or...
Sometimes, but boys are still taught boys don't cry, boys fight
Right,
back.
that's what I mean.
And so, but the fact remains that there are men who have come forward, have reported abuse when they were children. And as you pointed out, some of these are the same men that are saying Christine Blasey Ford's lying because she waited so long.
Right.
Well, one of the things, so first of all, saying it the first time out loud is like the first step.
Right.
Because when you say it out loud, it then might be true.
Mm-hmm.
How often do people that are abused try to minimize it, try to suppress it, don't want even to themselves to own it, or because it gives it a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you tell it to somebody else, it gives it more reality.
Right.
There's more touchability to it. And then the first time somebody refers to you as a victim or as an abuse survivor or as somebody, they now know that they are out there and they are risking all of the judgment and the garbage. There's this whole thing about, that some of your most vitriolic homophobic men are secretly bisexual or gay,
Right.
and they can't stand their own attraction.
Right.
And sometimes the people who have not come to peace and healing with their own sexual abuse can be vitriolic to those who were brave enough to come out.
Right, because they can't face it.
They can't face it.
Right. That's just a shame, though. It breaks my heart to see people who are so brave to come out and be vulnerable and share their experiences, and usually they're cowards that call them liars and hide behind labels, and they
And to be honest, some of the vitriol, like you mentioned, is coming from people who are jealous or envious that this person has dared to speak out.
right.
I know somebody who experienced a lot of sexual trauma as a child who absolutely despises me because I've spoken about it. I've told people this happened. I tell my partners, you know, these things have happened. I might have a flashback. If that's what happens, here's what you do. And this person that I know won't tell anybody except people very close to her that anything happened. And even when she tells them, it's emotionless. She's distancing herself. She's denying that this has any effect on her. And she won't ask for help. She won't ask for support. And she really does not like the fact that not only have I spoken out, but I have asked for help. I have asked for support, because to her that's weakness.
Right, and that's sad. Right, I know a woman who said, okay, this has gone too far. Now you're prying into people's personal lives. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what needs to be done. The light needs to be shown on that this happens, as you said, way too often. Mm-hmm. And it happens to men, it happens to women, it happens to children, it happens to adults. None of it's right. It's all wrong, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to stop.
One of the things that I read recently was that about how we shame and blame the victim, because if we can find a way that it was justifiable for it to happen to them, then they are other than us, and then it can, so it's not going to happen to us. It's not going to happen to my kids. It's not going to happen to my sister or my brother or whoever. It's not going to happen to me, because I'm not one of them. They somehow asked for it. They somehow deserved it. And it is a very fear-driven, powerless urge to keep it outside of, but I'm not one of them, so I'm still safe. It's that illusion of safety, instead of understanding that if people spoke up about it more, if they were rewarded for speaking up for it more, those people that are hanging out in the shadows, that are perpetrators, would have far less success.
Exactly. Exactly. If people talk about this and you know, even let their kids know from a young age that this is out there, instead of thinking it's not ever going to happen to your child, because chances are it will, you need to give them the tools to prevent it or to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. But on the flip side of that, it is going to happen. But you know, we hear a lot about, you know, teach your children to avoid this, teach women not to walk after dark, teach, you know, whatever. But that is important, but it's still putting the focus on the victim being responsible for preventing it.
Well, that wasn't what I was getting at.
No, I know, I know.
But you're right. It's exactly. Why do we have to teach women to carry their keys as a weapon or to not go out at night alone? How about we teach everybody to have respect and have boundaries and, you know, be a decent person? You know, how about we focus on that?
Exactly,
you know?
exactly. There's a meme going around on Facebook that has the feature of a pie graph, a circle graph, and it has different colors, and the title is something along the lines of who is responsible or what is responsible for rape. And there's a list color-coded, you know, how people dress, where people walk, et cetera, and rapists. And the circle is entirely filled in with that one color, because that's the truth.
Right.
It is none of the things, despite what my parents and other people might have said, none of the things that happened to me were my fault. None of the things that have happened to other people is their fault. And yet we hear all the time, well, you shouldn't have been in the hotel room with him. You shouldn't have been walking down that street after dark. But there is common sense necessary. Don't get me wrong. There are certain things that you should probably avoid doing, but that still doesn't make it your fault if something is done to you.
You didn't ask for it.
Right.
Exactly. You're not asking to be assaulted if you're walking down the wrong street at the wrong time. And the only way that is going to stop this is to educate people, educate them about what constitutes sexual assault. I have a young adult novel that I wrote a few years ago where the main character was sexually assaulted by a boy that she was dating. And she reports it when she finds out that he has done the same to another girl. But then she's bullied and harassed and threatened because she never said no. Just like the situation mentioned in my Facebook post when I was 17. She didn't say no because she was frozen. I didn't say no because I happened to know that the boy had a knife in his pocket and I was terrified of what he would do if I said no. So I kept my mouth shut and just didn't try to stop him because it seemed safer not to. And it was the same in the novel. And, and that's, people don't understand because we hear no means no all the time.
Right, but sometimes you don't get the choice of saying that.
Exactly. And I'm a firm believer that no means no doesn't help. You need to teach that only yes means yes.
Right, exactly.
Absence of no does not mean yes. I'm not sure does not mean yes. Yes means yes, and that's the end of it. People need to be educated about that. People need to be educated about what resources exist. If you have been sexually assaulted, who can you turn to for help if you're afraid to turn to anybody? And people need to understand that this happens to a whole lot of people, and it is never the fault of the person it happens to.
Right.
Never.
It's always the perpetrator's fault, no
Exactly.
matter how you spin it. Always.
Well, and one of the things is that it's a very tough sell to me that somebody who's trying to initiate sex with somebody, if they go rigid, if they go frozen, if they completely shut down, that they're not noticing that the person is not kissing them back, is not engaging, is not, they know. They're just, well, until they say stop, I'm not going to. Until they say stop, I'm not going to. It's okay until they say stop. No, it's not. And the question should be, are you okay? Is this all right with you? Because you
want me to
know.
stop?
You know when somebody is not being physically responsive.
Right.
Yeah.
And that holds no water to me.
Me either, but it's the excuse a lot of people give right along with, well, they were drunk and unconscious, so they couldn't say no, so obviously it was okay. My brain wants to explode when I hear stuff like that. Seriously.
That aggravates me to no end.
Well, and you saw a little tiny bit of this, and I don't want to get sucked into the current hotbed politics issue that's going on with the whole Supreme Court thing, which is triggering a lot of people to take action. And so whatever happens with that, it was a good thing from the standpoint that it's making a lot of people actually feeling like they can't stay quiet. But one of the slightest little comments that I read in some of the stuff I was reading about it going on talked about how that Dr. Ford, as a child, was from a less affluent group. Like, and it was kind of like, well, she wouldn't have been at this party, or she didn't run with these people, she wasn't our kind of kids. It was from, more, I don't know if they said middle class, but it was a very clear thing that somehow, it was an affluent, rich, powerful group of kids, or they came from those kind of families, and that if she ended up at this party, it would not have been a normal or regular thing. And that somehow that meant that was clear that she was lying. Like, she wouldn't have been at that party. Which we all remember being teenagers, and if you're a cute, young, attractive thing, then anybody can invite you to any party.
Right.
And the thing is that the inference was, and I think it actually backfired, it did in my mind, that oftentimes people that come from rich, affluent, powerful places look at people that are from middle or lower class as if they're second-class citizens, and therefore what you would not do to somebody who was your next-door neighbor's daughter, you can do with the daughter or the son of somebody who is from across the track, from the wrong side of the track. And that somehow that's not as bad, that's okay. And there was just that little bit, right? I mean, I remember gritting my teeth when I was reading it, because it was kind of like he would be lowering himself to do that. So of course he didn't, because she was lesser than. And again, it was very subtle, but you read it, and that's what the message. And then I never saw it again. It kind of disappeared.
Well, that mentality's been around for forever, you know, and we need to step up, and we need to say, no, that is not acceptable.
Right, and along the same lines, we have the people who are accused of sexual assault and even go to trial and then get a slap on the wrist, if that, because we don't want to ruin his future.
Yes.
I am not going to say the name of the person that
of them.
There have been a lot
Yeah.
of them. There's
Yeah.
one very prominent one in the news, and I'm not
Yep.
going to say his name because he doesn't deserve to have his name said.
Exactly.
But yeah, and that's one thing that keeps people from coming forward. I grew up in a lower middle class family. If somebody from one of the richer families in my town, or one of the more prominent families in my town, had done something to me, I wouldn't have reported it, because he's higher status than I am. He's higher class, he's more popular. Everybody's going to believe him. And even if they believe me, nothing's going to happen, because
Right.
he's him and I'm
Right.
me.
And that actually was what made me feel like there was more validity of also not speaking out, was if those statements, those innuendos were true about the difference in the social status, you can't go, many people, and somebody who's now doing some exhaustive study and running and doing some stuff, was somebody who, the star football player in a small town, raped her, and she got blamed for it, and she got driven out, literally got driven out. Her parents had to move out of town and to another school system, because everybody was so horrible, because football was the only thing that little town had going for it. And if you were going to go after the quarterback, and the quarterback was no longer going to be able to make us a winning team, well, then you were the evil one.
Right.
Yep.
And how sad is that's your priority?
And that was a component in the situation when I was 11. The boys who were sexually harassing me were on the school basketball team. And at the time, if I remember right, the school basketball team was the only team that was actually winning anything. And they were consequenced for what they had done, and that impeded their ability to play basketball. And that's why 5 years later, I was still getting harassed about it.
Yep. It's your fault that our basketball team didn't win. Yep.
So pathetic.
But we hear that, we see this all the time happening in a number of different ways. And, we talk about it, but the people who are the people that have the power, so to speak, that are on the upper side of the power differential, really don't get it. That sometimes somebody doesn't feel like they can say no, or they don't feel like they can report it because it's your boss and you could lose your job. Are they going to believe you? Right. They're the new star person, in the company, and they're bringing in great sales and they're doing stuff. Now that's definitely gotten better, but there is still that power differential. I don't know if either one of you, trying to remember, the name of it. They just actually redid the movie recently, but it was a movie and they redid it with Matthew Broderick. But the name of it will come to me at some point. How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, I think it was. But there's actually a whole song in there. It was written in the 60s about a secretary is not a toy. No, sir, boy, not a toy. Treat her. I listened to that, and that was in the early 60s. And I was like, boy, there's a lot of people that need to hear that
Right.
today. In the 60s, they were so, because Broadway tends to be cutting edge anyways most of
Right.
the time, but they had a whole song about be more respectful of the women in your work situation.
Right. And this all comes down to parents teaching their kids self-respect and self-restraint and respect for others. We teach our kids at a young age to think if someone's better or less than they are. And this all comes down to. And it's just not right. We need to teach them that everybody's important, everybody has value, everybody deserves respect, and yes, no means no, but you like we already said, you're not always in a position where you feel safe to say no.
Yeah, and I would go a step further and say that not only does that education need to happen at home, because sometimes it's not going to happen at
And
home
at
because the
school.
parents don't know, or the parents were brought up that this was okay. It needs to happen in schools. It needs to happen on
the
social
community,
media.
in
It needs to
churches.
happen on cable access TV. Everybody needs to understand and learn that it is not okay to do something against somebody's will, and if they have not said that it is
If they
with
haven't
their will,
given
it's not.
consent, right?
Yep. So I do want to remind people that if you come to facebook.com/mydrkevin, MYDRKEVIN, that is the feed that I'm monitoring. We do have a comment that has come in.
Okay.
The comment has come in from Donna Clarissa Bass, who I know Donna actually.
Yeah.
Fascinating topic. I also have experienced this in my younger days. When I was young, we all struggled together. Women were meant to be seen, not heard. What a great day when we make the way for our young women to speak truth. Bless you.
Oh.
Thank you, Donna, for commenting. And again, if anybody wants to ask a question or be part of this conversation, facebook.com/mydrkevin, MYDRKEVIN. Make sure you like the page when you're there. I'm a likable guy. But if you're watching this on one of the other streams, that's where you need to leave comments if you want to ask a question on air. So, women were meant to be seen and not heard, as were children.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
There was this hierarchy of seen and not heard, and then when we say, well, why didn't you tell somebody?
Right. How many people have heard that ridiculous line? Well, you should have told somebody.
Except that you were told not to tell
Except
anybody.
you were told not to tell anybody. You were told not to talk about it. You were told not to think about it, But, and it goes to just simple things like forcing your children to hug and kiss people.
And-
Stop doing that.
Yeah, I used to be guilty of that with my own children, and then it occurred to me, wait a minute, what am I teaching my kids here? And I remember one time, I'm divorced from my kids' dad. My kids are both adults now. But when they were young, I was dropping them off with their dad for the weekend, and their dad told one of them to give me a hug, because at that point she just wasn't really into hugging. And he told her to give me a hug, and she kind of balked at the idea, and he tried to push the point. I said, no. She has the right to decide who she is going to hug, when she is going to hug. If she does not want to give me a hug, that is fine because it is her choice. But you're right, we teach kids constantly, go give grandma a hug.
Right, submit.
You have to let Auntie so-and-so kiss you on the cheek because that's what she does. And that's not okay. Something in Donna's comment made me think as well. It would be wonderful if women supported each other in coming forward about this. In some circles, in some communities, they do. But a lot of times, women are worse than men when it comes to accusing the victim. I've seen it over and over again, and I think it's what you were saying earlier. You know, well, if she's this type of person and she was dressed like this and whatever, then, you know, it's all her fault, and therefore it's never going to happen to me.
Yeah,
Right.
and that some of that is the fear and powerlessness stuff.
Yep.
And I'm not saying it's okay, but at least I mean, I kind of recognize it. The other side of it, sadly enough, is there is such a competitive push for females that their value is so much about getting and keeping the attention of a male.
Again,
that-
something we're taught very early in life.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if a woman comes forward or a girl comes forward and says, well, you know, Joe Big Guy came and did this to me, then all the girls that have crushes on Joe Big Guy are going to dogpile on her because, you know, well, we wanted him and you had him and now you're causing trouble and whatever. And I don't want to get off on a tangent about this because that's beside the point. I just want to say, you know, if you're anybody that somebody is coming to and saying this happened to me, if you're seeing it on your Facebook feed, if you're seeing it on Twitter, support the person. And if you can't support them, please keep your mouth shut.
Right.
Don't make it any harder than it already is. Don't diminish their courage. Don't diminish what they've gone through.
Well, and it's so, and it's not uncommon, especially in young victims, in children, when children are molested, sexually abused, attacked, that they will literally be told, if you tell anybody, I'll hurt them.
Right.
It will be your fault. As somebody who was abused, sexually abused as a child, you know, my abuser every time reminded me that my parents would be hurt if I said anything, and it would be my fault. So was I going to speak up? I was
Right.
4 years old.
Right, because you want to protect your parents. You
Yeah,
love them.
I was 4 or 5 years old. Now, the other side of the coin, which I want to bring up here, is years and years later, like 3, 4 years ago, I'm sitting around with a lot of my older cousins and a couple of aunts and uncles, and I mentioned something about being sexually abused as a child. And what I heard is, well, yeah, we thought that might be happening. We suspected, but, you know, you didn't say anything. You know, you didn't talk about it. We were. Do not ever think that a child or anybody is being abused or has been attacked and think, especially somebody that you love or have some level of responsibility for, and think that you're not supposed to talk about it, that it's not your business.
Right. Find
Exactly.
out. Ask questions. Are you okay? Is this happening? What can we do to help? How do we take care of you and take care of the situation or whatever? Don't be like, oh, well, you can't tell anybody because it'll make the family look bad or whatever. You know what? It's already an issue. You need to bring it out. You need
Right.
to talk about it. You need to address it, and you need to support the victim.
And, you know, one of the things, in my case, when I was at this family gathering as an adult, was that one of the things is that whole, and you just didn't talk about it back then. Unfortunately, back then is still today, in a lot of areas of the
Right.
country, in a lot of places, you just don't talk about it. It makes people uncomfortable. You don't know what to say. If you think that you have a child in your life or even an adult in your life that is being abused in any way, and you don't know what to say, reach out to a professional and say, I think this is going on. I don't know what to say. Can you help me? Report it to somebody. Let somebody know. Let somebody who knows what to say it, if you can't. But to do nothing is to be complicit of the crime.
I agree
Exactly.
completely. You know, if you suspect, like you said, any kind of abuse, not just sexual abuse, not just sexual assault, any kind of abuse. I've experienced it more than once where, abuse happened or not okay things happened. And when I finally spoke up, I heard, well, what took you so long? We knew this was happening. If you knew it was happening, why the bleep
Right?
did you not say anything? Why did you not reach out to me and say, we see this, are you okay? What can I do to help? If you suspect, reach out to the person. If the person denies it, which a lot of times they will because they don't want to admit it's happening.
Well, and they're afraid.
And they're afraid. If they deny it and you still suspect it's happening, then like Dr. Kevin said, go to a professional, talk to somebody. If it's a child, make a report to Child Protective. You can do it anonymously. But don't just stand there knowing that something's going on or believing that something's going on and let it keep going on.
Right.
One of the things is that a few years ago when I was in England for several months, that was when the big scandal was coming up in the House of Parliament. And you over here, you may or may not have heard that much about it. I was living over there at the time, so it was a big deal. And several of the Parliament members were discovered to have been committing pedophilia. They've been going on for years. These were the runners of the government, and there's this kind of whole thing going on, and it's been going on for a long time. And just like the whole thing going on with the priest and these people, more often than men than women, though there are women that do it, these people were in positions of power, and in some cases were in positions of power that we don't talk about it, served their purpose.
Right.
It served their purpose to say, oh, okay, I'll talk to them. That wasn't okay, but, we don't want to make a big deal out of it. We like Father so-and-so, or we voted for that prime minister, or we like, remember that oftentimes, and I'm not saying everybody, but it is not uncommon that people that rise to a position of power are also people that will abuse and misuse that power because they think that the life is a double standard. Now, maybe they don't use it through committing pedophilia or sexual abuse. Maybe it's through, there's somebody right now that, is justifying misspending $250,000 of campaign funds on private trips.
Right.
Abuse of power, abuse of power, abuse of power. And we allow that to happen. And when we allow any abuse of power to happen in any area, we're giving carte blanche to all areas. And they are the ones that strongly keep it out there. We don't talk about this stuff. Mm-hmm. You don't talk about this stuff. Shame the victim. Shame the victim. Right. Make it too hard for them to come forward. So I do have to ask you this question. In fact, I'd like to hear what both of you said. If you saw it, did you watch Dr. Ford's testimony?
I did not.
Okay. Did you watch Dr. Ford's testimony?
I only got to see a little bit of it because I wasn't home. I didn't have access to a TV, so I only got to see a few minutes of it live.
Okay.
You've seen snippets off and on from various sources, but.
So I just wonder if you thought that was handled respectfully from your points of view, but you didn't see it at all.
I saw one clip on Facebook, and that wasn't even a clip of Dr. Ford. It was a clip of a legislator's reaction to her testimony. And I will say, I can't remember who it was now, but his reaction was what survivors who come forward need to hear. We believe you. You are courageous.
I did see that feed too, but overall, no, they were not respectful to her. When one of them apologized to Brett Kavanaugh for that whole hearing, I can't even say what comes to my mind. I was so incensed and so angry that he could be that callous. But that's, that's his mentality is, well, this is a guy, this is a judge. Clearly, even though you're an educated woman, you're lying. Because what are you getting out of it? You must be getting something out of it, right? I'm sorry, she's put her whole life out there to be dissected,
Death threats.
everything.
Driven from her home.
Right. Why would anyone do that to themselves if they were lying? And for them to apologize to to Brett Kavanaugh it disgusts me. Yeah.
One of the top 10 saddest statements I heard in all of this was from a current sitting congressman, and I'm not going to remember the name probably because I blanked it out, but I'm sure you can find it easy enough on the web if you really want to know which one it was, because it's not a state that I have any ability to vote in, or I would definitely be carrying some signs. His comment was, even if it did happen, it's irrelevant. We just need to move forward.
Right.
I
How
read that,
wrong
too.
is that? That is so wrong.
Well, and
Of course it's relevant.
Well, and what's really relevant would mean that he lied at his Supreme Court nominee. When you can say it's all right for the Supreme Court nominee to lie to Congress about something, that makes no difference, he still needs to go forward, that tells me how broken the system is.
Right.
But also the people that applauded, some of the shenanigans going on, and like it's been happening for thousands of years, women oftentimes end up being the hostage of the fall guy.
Yeah.
Though we do have more women running for office this year than we've ever seen. So I'm always going to look for the silver cloud lining.
You have to.
Kim, I know you know this, but I don't think that survivors or whatever people, there are other terms people like to use for this. I'm just using the term survivor. To me, still kind of need to hear or like to hear is, yes, it was not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And we can get it on an intellectual level, but on an emotional level, it's very hard to not want to believe our parents or look at the damage that was done and say somehow, but I caused that damage. I damaged the basketball team. Mm-hmm. Was it really worth it? And the answer is yes, it was. Because as long as we allow this behavior. And one of the things you said that struck me very strongly was that when you are with your partners, you tell them what to do if you get triggered or you have a flashback, how to deal with you. And one of the things that I don't think people get, and I saw this quote and it was about one of the hearings that happened a few years ago where some young, wealthy, athletic guy got away with raping somebody, and the comment was something about, oh, it was no big deal. It was just a few minutes of his life, of her life. Why should it ruin his life for the rest of his life?
Right.
These are people that do not understand that, whether it's a form of post-traumatic stress syndrome, whatever you want to call it, you live with those terrors, those fears. It negatively impacts your life. It isn't like even if the person goes to jail, it makes it okay, or it erases it, or it takes it away. And people don't get that.
Right. It is, the incident might be a few minutes of somebody's life. The effects are permanent.
Right.
Even when you get help, even when you get support, those are still there. I've had professional therapy. I know that what was done to me wasn't my fault, and yet I still have moments of, what does it mean about me that these things happened? Mm-hmm. What does it mean about me? It doesn't mean a blasted thing about me, because it wasn't my fault. But on an emotional level, that doesn't always get through.
Right.
Nope. And I understand that. I understand how that goes. We want to thank you very much for coming. Again,
Yes.
it was a courageous post. Uh, I reached out to you very much last minute. We had an opening. I wanted to get you on as soon as possible because these are words people need to hear now. They need to hear more and more stories of those people who have made it through to the other side enough that they can come out and say, me too, or why I didn't report, or all of these things. This is a very important time for any voice that wants to speak out and share this for those people who have no reference to it, that can't comprehend the damage that was done by those incidences, those things happening. So I want to thank you for coming very much.
Thank you. May I say one last thing?
Absolutely.
I just wanted, I want to say, some of you watching this might be thinking, oh, it doesn't happen that often, or, oh, people make this up. Look for the hashtags #MeToo and why I didn't report, and actually read and pay attention to what you're reading. If you feel like you're alone, that these things have happened to you and you're the only one, you're not. You're really not. And again, look for those hashtags and read other people's stories. Even if you are still in a place where you can't say anything, sometimes, be careful, because some of these are triggering. And if you're in the middle of it, you could be triggered. But sometimes reading or seeing that other people have experienced it helps you understand that you're not alone, and sometimes that can be a spark for healing.
Okay, thank you. So today we looked at some very difficult things, some highly emotional and some highly personal things. Many of you out there have been touched either by knowing somebody, loving somebody, or being somebody who was abused, sexually abused, or physically, mentally, emotionally abused, somebody who did not give their permission, who did not say yes. And we have a society that will shame you, blame you, try to put you away in a closet, throw you into a corner, and not hear what you have to say because it makes them uncomfortable. And the only thing I have to tell you is make them uncomfortable enough for them to take the kind of actions that need to happen so this stops happening. Namaste.